This is Akashvani. In the program Money Talk, now we bring you a discussion on inclusive urban development for a sustainable future. The participants are Dr. Yamini Agarwal, economic analyst, and Anubha, rohtagi, anchor.
Three-day meeting of the G20 group officials will discuss issues around infrastructure investments and financing inclusive, resilient and sustainable cities. To discuss more about the issue, we are now joined by economic analyst Dr. Yamini Agarwal. Dr. Agarwal, welcome to the program.
Thank you.
Dr. Agarwal, first of all, for our listeners, I would like to know what is the agenda of this G20 meeting, which involves discussions on financing cities of tomorrow. Can you please elaborate on that?
Well, primarily, the India's G20 presidency looks at various aspects which specifically are, encircling developmental agendas of the cities as well as looking at the SDGs. Also, it concentrates on lifestyle environment, and one of the most important aspects is Vasudevam Kutumbam. That means the world is a family and we are one family all together. So when we talk about the G20 agenda, it is primarily towards meeting sustainable development goals through structural transformative actions. And among the various series of working groups which will work on how to achieve sustainable development goals, one of them is also to work towards building and rebuilding cities in a manner which are sustainable in nature, are inclusive in nature, resilient in nature.
By one estimate, Dr. Agarwal, by the year 2050, nearly twice as many people will live in cities as they do now. In this context, how significant is this issue of planning and financing cities of tomorrow?
Well, it's very important to understand that cities are continuously growing in the world, and primarily there is a migration that is taking place from the rural areas to the urban areas, and which is leading to a lot of population coming together at one place. And because of which what is happening is the city infrastructure is unable to deal with such large population. And there is a huge amount of a pressure on the infrastructure, whether it is water, whether it is air, whether it is housing or any other infrastructure that is concerned. What also happens is because people do not plan it and they come from one place to another and start building their houses or building their holdings, there is a lot of difficulty in utilizing the resources which the city possibly possesses. So that is again a problem. Then there are issues of environmental degradation, there are issues of crime, there are issues of corruption, which adds on to the further activities. We've already seen that in many times the infrastructure is unable to take traffic, let's say, and bridges develop cracks or they fall, or at times severages are blocked during rain time and it's difficult to travel, and they also pose problems of having a lot of diseases which people suffer from, and a lot of times price rises and other factors.
With adverse climate change impacts issues, where sea water levels and Earth's temperature are rising, we are getting unseasonal rains, we're getting droughts. The cities of today and their managers are facing numerous challenges. So what kind of inclusivity, resilience and sustainability measures are required to plan better cities for future generations?
Well, it's important to see cities as sustainable themselves, for which it is important that the infrastructure developed is somewhat more friendly towards the environment, is containing the environment, ensures that there is not much greenhouse gas emissions that are there, also ensures that while taking care of the infrastructure, it provides for a long-term sustainability in terms of, let's say, developing renewable sources as energy sources, also ensuring that the frameworks of whether it is usage of water or any other resource is such that not only the current generation but also the future generation tends to use it and benefit it. Definitely reduction in the greenhouse emissions by planting more trees, more natural habitats, ensuring that the transportation is more smoother, also ensuring there is affordable housing so that people, especially who are poor and vulnerable, are able to live life of dignity, also ensuring that water which is clean and safe and drinkable is made available to each and every individual, simultaneously safety of people is taken care of. Power, let's say for example, is available 24/7, ensuring that people get access to different facilities and are able to utilize the resources to the best of their productivity.
City planning and financing has mostly been the domain of governments, but given that the governments have, limited, let's not say limited, but given the kind of budget that the governments have and the different sectors that they have to, look into, how important, what is the role of private sector investment in this particular area?
I think a very important role, because the private sector has somewhere or the other not invested in the infrastructure, primarily because there are long gestation periods and they shy away from the huge investments that are there. And that is why it completely remains a responsibility of the government in building up a lot of infrastructure, whether it is road, railways, ports or anything else. And hence it was brought about that the PPP model, which is the public-private partnership model, may be introduced, and in consonance with whether it's technology, financing or other activities, private players may be introduced in it. We have seen private player induction in, let's say, housing. A lot of private developers have come in. Similarly, when you see different projects, there are different companies that have come to build toll bridges or others in partnership with the government. What is also important is to see that the government finds itself resourceful in terms of the local authorities like the municipal corporations or the others to develop the cities and to provide for public goods like safety, like water, like hygiene or other activities that are there. Also at the same time, it is important that the infrastructure, the private players, when they develop with a planned structure where they contribute to the existing public goods. If you look at present integrated townships, they look very beautiful from the boundary in which they live. But when you look beyond the boundaries, they are not developed to make it accessible for people, or even sometimes are not very livable for people who are surrounding these regions. So private players again limit themselves. So it's very important that investments are ensured by the private players in consonance and cooperation with the authorities and the government bodies to ensure livelihood for not only the people who can pay, but for also people who are vulnerable and poor.
When we talk of private sector investment, the investors will come forward only if projects are bankable and, let's say, credit-worthy. So in this case, what can the governments do to encourage private sector participation?
Well, it's very important that the private players are given a lot of confidence in terms of the government support wherever it is needed, for which the government has provided e-governance mechanism and digitalization platforms for all approvals that are required. Similarly, digitalization of records and also single window frameworks for approvals are one key important aspect. Second, consortium of banks, also the networks of not only fintechs, NBFCs and many other financial institutions to come together and have confidence on the private players to give them access to funding at a lower cost would provide a further help. Again, another important aspect is international agencies must come forward in adopting private players to make them technically sufficient and sound to reach out to such large developmental goals which specifically are to do with cities or townships or generating public goods which are specifically needed not only for the general public but to the poor and the ones who are underprivileged.
What is the role that technology can play which will then reduce the investment?
The government has done a lot of activities in this regard, whether you talk about digitalization, one, because it makes you connect to several networks. Second is the entire set of developments in the financial system itself. The transfer of funds which are 24/7 to the number of digital banks that have been a part, to the fintechs that have been introduced. Also a large amount of consortiums being created where large bank units where with mergers have been created to fund projects. Another important aspect is the capital markets, which is deep. We speak of the capital markets today rising every moment, and that is giving the depth of the capital markets to fund projects. Another important aspect is how the different financial instruments have been accepted with a slow and gradual process of financially reforming the structure of funding projects. Another important aspect which is needed is the consortium, or how the private players are brought together to further pick on, investments, and involvement of MSMEs is very important. Why? Because these small units also by themselves in their aggregation can contribute largely to the growth of the economy.
Dr. Agarwal, we were talking about some data at the beginning of this discussion, and it is being estimated that by the year 2070, the fastest urbanizing regions of the world, which are the sub-Saharan Africa and Central and Southern Asia, will add 2,500 more cities to their list of existing cities. Coming to India, because we are part of South Asia, how important is, a discussion on planning future cities, how to finance these future cities? How important is it for India?
It is a very important subject, and we have seen that the government has been working on smart cities, where we talk about smart grids, where we talk about conserving water, ensuring availability to people in terms of intrinsic tourism, also ensuring employment is generated locally. Let's say, for example, they have established one district, one product, starting with uniqueness in each district so that people don't travel. Then schemes like Mundra or the Stand Up India, which are funding themselves, then creating self-help groups. Another important aspect is integration and believing in your own products, which is local for vocal, which is also an important. And then there is a heavy investment on infrastructure, which is through the Sagarmala and the Bharatmala projects. Also, we do see that the kind of speed the national highways have picked up and the logistic frameworks that have been created has built on the strength of India. Another important framework of combining India and creating better cities which are more friendly to people, because if I want to even consult a doctor who may be, let's say, in an urban area, it is the internet and the digitalization framework. I don't probably have to go to a higher education institution much farther away. I can probably get that access even on my computer at a very cheaper speed. So these are some things that is definitely bringing about a strong impetus. 24/7 power vision with one power grid. These are all that are in the positive direction of sustainable cities themselves. And then a focus on renewable energy and how even farmers have been asked to use their lands which they're not using for agriculture purposes for establishing solar panels. Universities being given subsidies to have solar panels. Similarly, I can tell you from educational institution point of view, rainwater harvesting has been one important agenda on their self. Then making cities accessible to people, especially the disadvantaged, disabled people, whether it is buses, whether it is their toilets, whether it is, reaching out to the buildings. They're all a part of the sustainability, inclusivity and resilience that we are looking at.
Dr. Agarwal, how will the G20 countries track their progress on city finance?
Yes, it is a very important point, because all the countries today would like to know as to what investments are going where and what transformative action have, it really achieved, for which the Infra Tracker 2.0 has been brought into place, which tracks the process in which the private and the public sector contributes to the infrastructure and what budgeting tools they have adopted and how far has been the progress overall in bringing about the requisite transformation for achieving the sustainable development goals, which is the agenda of even the G20 presidency.
Thank you so much for joining us on the program.
Thank you.
You were listening to a discussion on inclusive urban development for a sustainable future. The participants were Dr. Yamini Agarwal, economic analyst, and Anubha Rohtagi, anchor. This program was produced and presented by the News Services Division of Akashvani. You can listen to it on our mobile app, News on AIR. This program is also available on our YouTube channel, News on AIR Official. You may share your feedback about this program through email at airnsdtalks@gmail.com or WhatsApp on 928-909-4044.